Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the conversation. I'm your host, Roxanne Grace. Guys, today we are talking to Shawn Gabie. You don't want to miss it, so sit back, relax, and get ready for this conversation. Shawn and his beautiful wife, Michelle Gabie, are the founders of Kingdom Culture and the lead pastors of the local church that meets weekly in Ottawa, Canada. Shawn is an author and he's the host of the Supernatural Leadership Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how our lives can truly be changed with one encounter with God. We're going to talk about overcoming obstacles and verbal abuse. And Shawn is going to share with us what he believes God is saying in this season. Let's bring in the man himself, Shawn Gabie. What's up, Shawn? How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you and be with you on this amazing podcast. I'm super excited.
Oh my gosh, honestly, the honor is mine, and I'm totally stoked about our conversation today. For those of you that are watching, you don't know this, but Shawn and his absolutely beautiful wife, Michelle, have been amazing friends of mine for a lot of years. We don't talk about how many years because it will kind of age us, but for a long time. And I know you, Shawn, we have so much that we could talk about and touch base on today, but unfortunately, we only have like a half an hour together. So I'm going to try to get to as much as I can. So what I've been doing is we start out usually by asking our guest a series of questions, that kind of like personality questions. And so people, they listen to your podcast. You're a well-known pastor in Canada. You have stuff all over social media and just media in general, but not everybody knows like the real personality of Shawn. So hopefully this will kind of let them get to know you in a greater, deeper way. So I'm going to ask you questions. Don't think too much about them. Just kind of answer really fast. Ready?
Awesome. Let's do it.
Okay. First question. What is your favorite color?
Ooh, I have to say, my kids always ask me that, and I always say a shade. It's black. I can't say color. I don't have a favorite color. I have to say a shade. It's black.
You're kind of cheating because it's not a color.
I know it's not a color, but that's like the closest thing to a color for me.
I understand because I always say like to people, I'm like, when you go in my closet, like, what should I wear today? Black, or black. I love black and Shawn, so I'm with you on that. Okay, what is your favorite food?
I'd have to say sushi.
Oh, sushi.
Yeah, sushi, hands down.
I don't like sushi, and everybody always says, oh, you just haven't tried the right sushi. So like, you gotta come here and try this. And every time I try at the right sushi, I still don't like it. But good for you. Sushi apparently is amazing. All right. What is your favorite word?
Word?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a hard one. That's like no one's ever asked that before. I have no idea. My favorite word. Let's say it is. I don't even know. Jesus? Can I say that? I don't know. I don't know what my favorite word is.
That's a very good.
These are hard questions. Favorite color, favorite word. I have no idea.
I love asking these questions because we ask the same questions every single week. And every single week we throw our guests off guard.
What's your favorite word?
Shawn.
Give me an example. Give me a reference point. Give me some context.
Honestly, I would probably have to say it is Jesus as well. And it's technically, it is a word, it's a name, but just because there's just so much power in that particular name, that word.
Okay, sounds good. We have the same favorite word.
Oh, there we go. So we have the same favorite word. You're not allowed to do that.
I'm so sorry.
We can get you back another time. Okay. So if you were to time travel somewhere, where would you go and when?
I would go back to the garden in the beginning, creation. Where it all started, to be an observer.
And like, don't do it, Eve. Don't do it.
or at least get in on sort of like what it was like before Eve did it,
Oh wow, that's an amazing answer.
Maybe like step on the serpent. No, but then we wouldn't be created. Who knows what would have happened then? Maybe step on the
serpent. Maybe we would have been created. Well, it'll look a lot different though.
Yeah. But there'd be no free will then if there was no serpent. I would have ruined free will for all people.
Okay, Shawn, what makes you sad?
What makes me sad is thinking about what I could have done different in the past and how that affects my present.
Incredible. That's a great answer. Okay. So what makes you happy?
When I feel like I have wins in areas where it's felt like it's been lost for a long time,
Wow.
or things haven't worked out or panned out the way that I expected. When I get that win, it's like, wow, amazing. And that could be in any area. It could be in relationship, family, business, ministry. It could be in any area.
I absolutely love that. You know what? This kind of just triggers a thought in my mind. You know, so often we can get going a certain direction or feel like we're caught up in a rut or something that could be challenging. And then it's just like that one moment when God reminds you who you are. To me, when you say wins, it's like, oh, that's right. And it's so refreshing. It's so refreshing. I love that. Okay, Shawn, I know that you hear the voice of God often and in so many different ways. But if you could hear the audible voice of God right now, what question would you want him to answer?
It's a tough one. Right now, if you like right in this very moment without thinking of all the things, I would say, give me, God, show me. This might sound totally bad, okay? I'm just being totally honest. Show me the next big investment that I need to make right now that's going to set my kids up for the rest of their lives.
Oh, such a practical, great answer. I love it. And usually we get like very spiritual answers, and I love every answer has been amazing. And I'm also
it is spiritual in the sense of I actually think about often the most like legacy, like what am I leaving for my kids? And like I know there's practical and spiritual, and I'm like, I think a lot of times they're married together. And so my prayer is always, God, like what can I do now in this season, whatever it is, to set my kids up so they're living on my ceiling and not starting on the same floor that I started.
I absolutely love that answer, and you're absolutely right. It is marriage together. Everything we do is spiritual, you know. But anyways, all I have to say is all the answers have been great, but I love that because it kind of brings it to a whole nother practical level. Absolutely amazing. So, Shawn, so everybody that knows you as this man of God. I mean, you are the lead pastor of an incredible church in the capital of Canada, in Ottawa, Canada, called Kingdom Culture. You have like a podcast that is reaching so many people and impacting so many lives. You're an author, so you're doing so much for the kingdom of God. And I know your heart, and I know that you truly just want to do all you can do for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and just truly impact people's lives. But I also know that you haven't always been this way. I know your incredible story. It's actually pretty remarkable. So maybe kind of bring us back to the beginning. You weren't even raised in a Christian home, were you?
I was, in the sense of like, I was raised by a single mom. At the age of 5, my parents divorced. So my mom raised my sister and I. So she was a church goer, but I didn't believe and didn't buy in and didn't understand the reality of who Jesus was until I was 18.
Wow.
And I didn't even know there was a God. Like even though I grew up around it, even going to church, I did not say yes. I did not believe. I did not truly have a revelation of who God was until I was 18 in my car. And that was after a long journey of a lot of bad things that were destroying my life, that were driven from brokenness, that was driven from hatred towards people around me, but also myself. And it wasn't until I was 18 in my car on the highway. Nobody prayed for me. Nobody laid hands on me. Nobody led me in a prayer. I had a visitation in my car where the atmosphere of my car changed. The only way I could describe it was like it was a physical peace. It was better than any drug that I'd ever done. It came on my physical body. I didn't see anything, but I heard a voice very clear say, make a choice. And I didn't even know and did not believe that there was a God who spoke, let alone a God that was real, a God who spoke. And I heard a voice very clearly on the inside of me. Everything vibrated, make a choice. And it was like in that moment, almost like when you're in a dream, the blinders just come off and you just know that you know that you know. Like in a dream, you just know things in a dream sometimes. You don't know how you know, but you're looking at somebody and you know this is that person. You don't know how you know, you just know. Well, it was in that moment, it was like my spirit was so in tune with what was happening that this was Jesus speaking to me. And I said, okay, I'm all in. And then I went into the season where I lost my job. And for the next 6 months, I spent 4 to 8 hours a day in conversation with God, learning about his word, which I had no idea about, the Bible, and then going to the streets, going to the bars, going into the clubs, and bringing my story. I didn't even know, I couldn't tell you really the theology of the gospel. I couldn't tell you, I didn't have scriptures memorized. I just had a testimony of totally transformed in my spirit. And I would share this story, encounters that I would have in my conversations with God during the day, at the bar, at the club, and things started to happen, which then reinforced, wow, this is mind-blowing. Like, I can bring my encounter in my car and in my bedroom every day into these environments and actually see incredible things happen. So that was kind of like the starting point, the launch pad of my journey, really. And that's just like the nutshell. Of course, there was so many like elements to that, with like drugs and stuff and things that were like holding me back, and different elements that were trying to bring me down that were a part of that journey. But, you know, when I had that encounter, I was all in. Even though I had no idea what I was all in for, I was all in, and I haven't looked back since.
Honestly, it's truly, truly remarkable. Like, it was a real transformation. You had a real encounter with a living God that changed your life. And as a result of that, thousands upon thousands of other people have encountered the one that we serve, the living God. I also know, Shawn, you've told me before that when you were in ninth grade, and I feel like I'm kind of switching where we're going here, but when you were in ninth grade, like, I love watching your life because you are doing so many incredible things. It's such a testimony of where you've come from. But I know that in ninth grade, there was a teacher in your high school that told you that you were going nowhere.
Wow, you have that's a good memory. I'm amazed. Yeah, that's an amazing memory. Yes, it was an English teacher, actually. I know, I can remember. I know his name. I could say his name right now. And he was my ninth grade English teacher, and he told me, he said these words in front of the whole class. It was in context to a question I had asked, or something that he asked me that I didn't know the answer to. And he said, Shawn, you're never going to amount to anything. And it's crazy how you remember these things, as like, even as like, you think that, you just brush it off, whatever. But that comment, like, it stuck to me. Wow. Like in my soul, like glue. And the other part of this journey too, is like, let's just rewind a little bit. Like, from the age 5, I had a severe speech impediment. I went to speech therapy for a severe stutter. And I always was a background guy. Like I said, I'll never speak behind a mic. I was a musician. I was a drummer, later on. But as a 5-year-old, all the way until I was 18, like I was like the most anti-public speaker you would ever meet. In fact, I would go into major anxiety, even not even public speaking, just like talking to people. And I remember going to friends' houses and having to say thank you to them, and fearing like I was not going to be able to say it because I would stutter. And so this became an insecurity and followed me through all this journey of, exploring everything else but God, going down destructive paths. And I remember, like, I would tell friends of mine that had these encounters with God, like, that were praying for me at one point, because I had a 6-month window or 9-month window where one of my best friends gave his life to Jesus, and was praying for me every night for 45 minutes. I didn't know this at the time, that I had my encounter. And even after I had that encounter, like, I would say to him and these people, like, I'm never going to speak behind a mic. Like, I love Jesus, like, and I'll, do what I'm called to do, but I'll be a drummer. I'll be more of a background guy. And on my baptism, only about 2.5 months, 3 months into my journey, I got water baptized. And I remember, like, the church I was at the time where I got baptized, we'd give these big, like, long baptismal testimonial speeches, So I fasted for, like, probably, I think it was like 10 days or something almost maybe 2 weeks, fasted, like just to speak for 15 minutes because I was so scared, you know. And I wrote this whole thing out, and I remember like I got up there and I spoke, and when I went under the water, I came up and my tongue was loosed, and I was completely healed. And now this is the crazy thing: all I do is speak. Like my whole world revolves around public communication in so many different ways. And so just as like a part of my story, like it's healing, it's restoration. It's like Moses, like you've called me, but I can't do it. But that's the best place to be. When you can't, that just means God will, because then you have to try, or not try, you have to lean on him and trust that he's the one who's called you, not your strengths, not your gifts, not your skills, but his grace is going to empower you to do the impossible. And everyone's going to know that's not him. Like, that's not her. Like, that must be the grace of God on her or on him, you know? So that's a huge part of I don't know how I got on that tangent, but that's kind of interconnected into my story.
I absolutely love it, Shawn, because it's so real and it's so raw, and so people can relate to that. And you and I share this testimony because I also, when I was a young girl, I had a speech impediment, and I used to stutter like crazy when I was a kid. It's actually when my parents separated because I had so much fear of my dad.
Me too, I think too.
Yeah.
Around the same time. That's like how I timed it. It was around the same time.
Exactly. And so anyway, so same thing. Nobody would have ever thought, looking at me then, oh my goodness, you know, her world is going to involve a whole bunch of speaking and public speaking. And then same thing, you know, as a child, like my dad, you know, wasn't a teacher, but my dad would sit my twin sister and myself down day after day for years and just tell us, you're no good, you're going to result to be nothing in your life, and just speak like these word curses over us. And,
wow.
And you know, at the time, like I didn't realize the damage it was doing. If anything, like what I can tell you that I know that it did do was it caused like a root of resentment and bitterness in my heart, which that, you know, in the future held me back. You know, God has obviously set me free from that now, you know, and then I've also been in a past relationship where I went through something very similar to that. So this is not uncommon. Unfortunately, so many people can probably pick up a time in their life where somebody said, you can't do that. You can't do that. You're no good. You know, so for somebody that's watching right now is like, oh my gosh, like I could so relate, you know. What would you want to say to them? You know, just knowing the process that God has brought you to, the freedom he's brought you, what would you say to somebody watching that feels like they've lost themselves, they've lost their voice due to verbal abuse?
Yeah, I would just remind them that God is still the God of the impossible. I know that sounds like a cliche statement, but when you give him a chance to do the thing that's impossible, he really does the impossible. I remember, like, it was my English teacher that said that. And, you know, I wasn't doing good in English at that point. I mean, not because I couldn't speak, but it was just the English, you know, course that I was doing. I wasn't doing good in it. And it was my English teacher that said, I will never amount to anything. And then when I was 21, a year and a half really after I gave my life to Jesus, almost 2 years, I wrote my first workbook on the prophetic, which was a training school to teach people how to hear the voice of God and then take that to the street or whatever sphere they were in. And when I did that and I accomplished that, it was like a stepping stone. Like I stepped out of my comfort zone, developed this curriculum, which actually became the spawn of everything I'm doing today. Like our whole ministry, actually, our whole traveling, everything that I've ever done came from that first school. All my media stuff I did in the beginning, even with Patricia King, like it all came from this first school that I had developed. And then when I was 28, I published my first like official book with Destiny Image. And that was like another almost like stone in the ground, almost like memorial stone saying, see, like that word over my life is not true. I just did the very thing, like my English teacher, I just did the very thing over that 7-year period that, in a sense, like for me at least, maybe it's not in the eyes of a lot of people like a big accomplishment, but for me, that was like, I just did the impossible. I just did what the word said I couldn't do. The word that I would never amount to anything. I just did the opposite of it. Not because I was trying to prove to my English teacher, which I had no relationship with anymore anyways, that I wasn't trying to prove anything to him. I was just saying, you know what? I'm not going to let these things rob me I'm going to let them empower me to lean more on God and not on my own skill or lack thereof. So that became the fuel to the fire. And I can't, obviously there's been many more things that have happened that just remind me that that was just a word that was, I believe, almost like an assignment to try to rob me of what God really had intended for my life.
Wow. And I honestly, you're saying something here, because everybody at some point in life has had something come against them where they feel like they can't, but I love that where we are weak, he is strong. And it is incredible how God, he seems to use the areas of our weakness to glorify him. And it's amazing. Let's go here. I don't know what you're comfortable sharing on the show here, but because I know you and Michelle so well, I know that that you met. Well, actually, I think you met Michelle through me. Was it through me or through Mimi or somebody? Anyways, we were all like a group of friends. But I remember when your eyes were opened and when you started to get a crush. Can I go here?
You can. I may not share all the details, but because this is public forum and this is the kind of story that would get me in trouble. But yeah, I'll share, like, generally speaking.
Well, I love it, Shawn, because you have a podcast on the supernatural. It's called Supernatural Leadership Podcast. You have a book on the supernatural. I know that God often works through you. I mean, we know we serve a supernatural God, and you see a lot of supernatural happen through your life and through your ministry, naturally. And so, but you also met your wife in a supernatural kind of way in that sense. So do you mind sharing that? Because I always just been blown away by this story.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to share without like the detail.
Totally.
And then if I give you the detail, I don't have enough time to contextualize everything from like a biblical like I would share this story, and I have a course called The Language of the Spirit 201, and I would actually share the story in that context, because I would actually teach on the supernatural and give like biblical precedent for things that I would share as testimony to connect with the biblical sort of like backdrop. I would say this, that, I prayed growing up in a broken home. I prayed that my wife or my future marriage would be confirmed by something that would blow my mind. Like, just, and that was, whether or not that happened, I mean, I don't know. That was my heart. I'm like, God, you got to give me, this was like my prayer at the beginning. You got to give me a sign that whoever I'm supposed to marry, like, I'm supposed to marry. I know, we all know, like, our emotions, our soul, our desires can lead us sometimes like down the wrong path. And I'm like, I just want the right person, the person that's going to make me a better person, the person that you've called me to be with. And so, like, like, kind of fast forward, I really met Michelle. I met Michelle really in my school. Like, that's when I first, like, because she came to one of my courses I was doing. It was like teacher student, even though she was actually older than I was, but she was in one of my courses, and I did not. There was no like attraction. No, I was not in that headspace. I mean, I wasn't. That just wasn't the space I was in. And it was actually a trip that we went on. I don't remember if you remember this, but I took like about, I don't know, 10 or 12 people. I don't remember the number of people, to Toronto to this conference.
I do remember
that. This conference. And so basically, like, that night, and once again, like, I had nothing for her. I mean, obviously, like, I was like, oh, she's nice. And like, but I wasn't like drawn to her that way, which is probably a good thing. So like, because sometimes when you're drawn to somebody and then you have an encounter,
right,
it's almost like, okay, like, how much of that is your own soulish desire? Like, it's hard to discern, right? Like, I think relationships are one of the hardest things to discern, because your emotions can really blind you sometimes when it comes to trying to hear God. It's like when you're praying for somebody on the street versus like praying for your husband or your wife, like, it's just different. You have no history, right? So it's like a clean slate. It's just a lot. I mean, like, do you agree with that? Like, it's just easier. It's cleaner. It feels just easier to lock in than when you're dealing with all the potential biases or history of somebody, right? So all that to say, just, sorry, long caveat there. It was at this event, and it was the first night. And like I said, I'm going to be general, but I had a very significant encounter in my hotel room where I woke up out of a dead sleep. And in this encounter, it was one of those encounters that like, it was so vivid, so real, so mind blowing that I actually thought, like, I actually fought in my mind to understand, is this real? Is this not real? Like, it was so crazy, so mind blowing, so bizarre that, and I was in a space in my head and in my spirit where I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this real? Is this not real? Like, what's happening? Anyways, and I won't give you all the details, but the next morning, the crazy thing is the next morning when I woke up, and I had told two of the guys in my hotel room what had happened that night. I told them because I needed someone to talk to about it. The next morning, we go to the event. I see Michelle. I talk to her. I'm thinking to myself, God, if that encounter was like a legit encounter and Michelle is something for me to be paying attention to, you got to confirm it today, or confirm it like ASAP, because now it's in my head, because the encounter involved Michelle.
Right.
And that morning at the conference, I was sitting down and the speakers were speaking, doing their message. And literally the speaker gets up and literally shares a story defining an encounter that he had, which was word for word, play by play, the exact same encounter that I had regarding Michelle. I'm telling you, it was so insane, Roxanne. Like, I actually thought at one point, okay, for sure this is a distraction, as I didn't want a girlfriend at that time. I'm like, the devil just possessed this speaker. Like, definitely a distraction. That's how like crazy I'm like, because there's no way. But I had prayed for I prayed for a confirmation. It was like Acts 12. It was like praying for Peter to get out of prison. Peter gets out of prison, knocks on the door, and they're like, Peter's here. They're like, no one believes him. It's like the answer's there. You asked for the confirmation. In that moment, I looked back at the guys who I had told this experience to, and they were like sinking in their chairs because they just heard the speaker say the exact same thing I said to them that morning, getting up in the hotel room, like the exact same thing. And so they were freaking out. I was freaking out. And that was sort of the beginning of me paying attention to Michelle and realizing that maybe this girl is my wife. But even after all of that, I still there was still more things that God had to do and to like prepare me to be the man I needed to be for her. It never ends. Now it's been almost 14 years of marriage, and it's still going. God's still preparing me, you know.
Praise God for our marriages. So let me ask you this, Shawn. So do you believe that God has a specific person set for everybody, or do you think he just blesses our choice if we're equally yoked?
I would say yes and yes. It's almost like, you know, when the people would ask Jesus a question, he would often answer with a question, you know. And I think that in this, it's really hard to say black and white on this, because I believe that in general, there's like permissible and there's beneficial.
Right.
You know, Paul talks about that. I believe that there's God's best and there's good. And I can't say theologically that I believe that, you know, like I said to both of you, I think there's yes and yes. I believe that God obviously knows the end from the beginning. So if God knows the end from the beginning, he knows everything in between. Like, I have to believe at some level that, like, okay, God knows what I'm going to decide, even though I have free will. God's still going to bless me because he's a good God.
Right.
But, you know, if I'm maybe not like totally tuned in the right way, I might be misled for a little bit. But the good thing about God, Proverbs 3 says, if I trust with him with all my heart and don't lean on my own logic, he'll eventually lead me straight. I'll get back on track again. So whether or not I got the good and then the good turned into the best, or I got the best off the bat, I don't know. I just believe that God always has a best for us. However we got there, I believe is determined by us at some level, because we make decisions. And if it takes us 40 years to find God's best, like it did Israel, right, we still arrive at God's best. But maybe we didn't start off doing it the best way. Kind of yes and yes on both sides. Like,
no, that's an amazing answer. So Shawn, as I mentioned earlier, you know, you have a podcast called Supernatural Leadership Podcast, and you wrote a book, Secrets of the Supernatural Life, your gateway to supernatural experiences. Obviously, there's a theme through your life. So tell me, why do you talk about the supernatural so much? And then I want to hear a little bit about the book and the podcast. But why the supernatural?
Yeah, I think in the very beginning of my journey with God, as I shared, it was very supernatural for me.
Mhm.
I needed, like a lot of people, like it can't just be like a decision. Like it's like we can't, I remember someone always would say this to me, like as I began my journey, like if you can argue somebody into the kingdom, they'll be argued out of it. We are won by a revelation, and a revelation is supernatural. And so for me at the very beginning of my journey, beginning like as a supernatural experience with God in my car on the highway, it just felt like natural for me to continue that pursuit of, okay, God, like you're so real. Like you're the God of the Bible. The Bible is full of supernatural experiences. If I'm signing up for a relationship with you and have no supernatural experiences, then what is this Bible that I'm reading? Like, and I just could not believe and buy into this idea that everything stopped, after the apostles, like all the good, crazy, amazing God moments just ceased to exist after the great apostles. So, and I know there's some people that acquire, have like, they live from that space,
Right.
and that's,
Mhm.
it's sad to me because that's boring. Like, I don't know. So at the very beginning of my journey, this was my pursuit. I was pursuing God 4 to 8 hours a day in my bedroom. And then I would go out into the club, into the bar, and I would actually see the transformation overflow individually in my life spill over into the marketplace. And that became just cement. This is real. This is for today. Supernatural experiences are my inheritance. And so not that I wasn't out there like seeking an experience. Like I just wanted like seek an experience. I was seeking God, and to seek God is to seek an experience with God. If I'm pursuing my wife, well, I'm pursuing my wife because I want to experience my wife, right? I'm not just seeking this idea of her or seeking this image of her. I'm actually pursuing her to experience her, right? Like to me, it's just common sense. And so I think that's why supernatural for me. And when I started seeing it happen over and over again, it just became like second nature. It's like the more you eat amazing sushi, the more you love it, right? So, like, I know you don't like sushi, but it's kind of that same principle. The more you do something over and over again, the more results you see, the more you realize, wow, this must be super important. And in the end, like I said, it's not seeking an experience; it's seeking God, who is the God of experience. And that's why for me. And so supernatural leadership, I mean, in the beginning, I shared that like I developed this curriculum around training people how to hear the voice of God. It just felt natural for me now to take what I had experienced and teach it to other people. How do I impart what's been imparted to me? Because teaching really is giving the deposit inside of you language. That takes time. So I spent months and months developing language around what had happened in my life, and then started to see it in other people's lives. So then I started realizing, man, like we need not just good principle-led leaders. We need presence-led leadership, which really is the premise of the whole supernatural leadership podcast, right? It's really helping us see the difference between and the chasm between principle-led leaders and supernatural presence-led leaders. So Daniel was influencing government for over 60 years. Not because he was a good, integral man, good character, trustworthy, faithful. He was all those things. But Daniel stood out because Daniel was a man of the supernatural. In fact, the king gave him charge over all the supernatural people that didn't even, believe in the same Hebrew God that Daniel believed in. These were astrologers, magicians, soothsayers.
Right.
Daniel was in charge of all of them. And his promotion happened as a direct result of supernatural things like interpreting dreams, all these different things. And so that became a driver for me. I want to impart, I want to train, I want to help be a part of raising up leaders, not just leaders that are good principle, led leaders, but presence-led supernatural leaders that will be like Daniel's, which then became sort of my vision for the School of Daniel, which now has become the Supernatural Leadership School, which we're actually completely launching online this year in 2021.
Tell us maybe a little bit about Secrets of the Supernatural Life, your book.
Yeah, so that was a book that I wrote 8 years ago, published with Destiny Image, and that really encapsulated at that point the first, I'd say 10, 11 years of my journey, and giving sort of practical language around how to take faith into the everyday, how to take the supernatural into the everyday. How do we experience God in our workplace? How do we experience God in our personal life, our family? How do we experience God when we're just hanging out on the street or in the grocery store, the coffee shop? I know we've done a lot of stuff together, like on the street in the past, coffee shops, whatever. And we know it's a different world out there. Like bringing the supernatural in the everyday is so important, but you only realize that when you do it, and you have to do it to actually begin to experience it. And the book really is about empowering people to do that in every sphere of influence, bring God into their everyday.
Absolutely. Guys, you need to get your hands on this book. It could change your life, absolutely change your life. Okay, Shawn, I want to close with this question. At the beginning when I was asking you the personality questions, I mentioned that I know, because I know you personally, and I know that you have been super intentional to grow in recognizing and hearing the voice of God. John tells us that we're his sheep, he's our shepherd, we hear his voice, we recognize his voice. I know you hear the voice of God in so many different ways. What would you say that God is doing and saying right now in this season?
Well, in this season, I would say that it's hard to separate what's happening globally from what God is saying, in the sense of, I believe God is speaking so much about finding the silver lining in the season, like finding the silver lining in the struggle, and gathering, kind of like what Joshua did when he crossed over the Jordan, gathering these memorial stones while he was in the middle of crossing over, while we're in the middle of what's happening around the world, the struggle, this pandemic, gathering these stones, gathering these things that are going to be memorials for future generations. And what I mean by that, if I can put like more language to that, is there is a silver lining in this season. There is a breakthrough. There is a strength in the struggle in the season. There is something so good that's going to come out of what for many is so bad, that if we can just get eyes to see and ears to hear what it is for us that God wants us to do, we'll win in this season. I believe it's a sowing season. It's a giving, it's an investing season. It's like, I've been meditating on Genesis 26, where Isaac, who was the third patriarch of the faith, Isaac sowed in the time of famine, it says, and the same year reaped 100-fold. Well, we're in a famine of sorts, economically, and so many levels. Famine on social famine. I mean, there's communities that can't meet with each other because it's illegal. I saw a video recently, like, this is where I live in Ontario. It was like, who'd ever thought the day would come when you could smoke weed at a family gathering, but the family gathering would be illegal. Like, that's the state we're in, right? You can smoke weed now, but at a family gathering, but the family gathering actually is the thing that's illegal, not smoking the weed. So that's the day we live in. It's a new day. It's a whole different dynamic. And so I think in this season, although it's hard on so many levels, there's so much good, so much silver lining, like Isaac saw, that in this season, I'm gonna invest, I'm gonna create, I'm gonna innovate, I'm gonna pivot, I'm gonna get a hold of what God is saying in this season, and I'm gonna bring these memorial stones across this Jordan that I'm in right now, across this hard moment, because the Jordan kind of signified this hard transition, this hard moment, this struggle. There was water and now it's dry. I'm crossing over. And these stones were gathered. And the whole point of it was that one day future generations would ask, what are these stones? And they would say, it was the time that God brought us through on dry ground. Well, I believe things that are going to come out of this season are going to be asked of us in a future season by our kids, saying, what is this? And you're going to be able to say, well, during the pandemic, during this global shaking, Daddy and Mommy were able to invest here, pivot here, innovate here. And this is the fruit of that. And this is what you get to experience now. You get to see the faithfulness of God in your parents in previous history right in front of your face. And I think that this is what I believe that God wants to get our attention on in this season, is that this good in the midst of the struggle, the strength in the midst of the struggle, the silver lining in this season.
I think you're absolutely right. And I love that perspective. To close, maybe you could share with our audience how people can find out more about you, or if somebody wants to even support you prayerfully or financially, how could they find more about you?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to connect with me on social media, it's at my name, Shawn Gabie. on most all social media platforms. Connect with me that way. Visit my Supernatural Leadership podcast. Check it out. Rate it, review it, subscribe to it. You'll get it. We're actually doing them more now. We were doing them originally. We were doing it once on the first Wednesday of every month, but now there's going to be a lot more coming out consistently throughout the month. And as well as if you do want to support, we do have a not-for-profit, which is connected to our church community as well. That's connected to other things that we're doing as well, called it's kingdomculture.ca, and you can go there and you can invest. So if you'd like and partner with us, but those are the main ways right now. And so keep watch though, because we're gonna be launching our online e-course, our online school on Supernatural Leadership really soon. So stay connected and you'll get all the information.
I love it. Again, Shawn, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy busy schedule to have this conversation. And thank you for your yes to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Like, honestly, thank God you said yes, because look at all the stuff that's going on in your world.
Thank you for having me. Love you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
All right, guys, that's all the time that we have with Shawn Gabie. I know that this episode blessed you as much as it blessed me. Guys, we have incredible guests every single week. So if you haven't already, like and subscribe to our channel. Also, check out our social profiles at Dream Label Group. Check out our website, dreamlabelgroup.com. There you will find a mailing list. And if you join that mailing list, you will be some of the first to hear brand new music from Dream and receive updates about our awesome show. Also, guys, I just want to thank everybody for watching or listening over podcast. For those of you that don't know, on our website, you can find a link to subscribe to our podcast. We are pretty much everywhere. You can find us at iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and so many more. Go check it out. All right, guys, until next week, stay blessed in Him, and we'll see you then. Hey guys, Roxanne Grace here. Thank you guys so much for watching Dream's YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single conversation or new music from Dream. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the like and notification buttons and share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Oh, and don't forget, you can subscribe and listen to the conversation anywhere podcasts are available. Thanks for watching.